Weeaboo, fandom slang, derogatory. A person who is obsessively interested in anime and or manga, sometimes shortened to just weeb. I've mentioned it in previous videos, but I had a bit of a weeaboo phase when I was a kid. It's the type of thing I wince and cringe about now, but I've talked about some of the nonsense from that time on live streams and thought it would be fun to compile all my best stories together into one video. Because I have some wildly embarrassing stories from my middle school baby weeb days. Additionally, when I told my friend about the idea for this video, she brought up that it might also be fun to talk about what life was like as an anime fan during our preteen years, seeing as the scene has changed so much since our childhood. And I thought that was a cool idea, so that's what I'm gonna do. A multi-purpose trip down memory lane featuring what it was like for weeby teens back in the early 2000s, as well as the, interesting things that my weeby teen self got up to back in the day. Also, I thought about doing a video with a spookier topic, seeing as it's October and it's the prime time for spooky videos, but digging up and talking about some of the stuff in this video is honestly a little terrifying for me, so not spooky for y'all, but definitely terrifying for yours truly. I am so not looking forward to some people teasing me about this stuff on future live streams, but I have chronic court jester disease and like to make others laugh even if it's at my own expense, so we're doing this, I guess. Let's go. But first, real quick, let's do Hey Star, What You Drawin'? The art in the background is the postcard and stickers for my webcomic Castoff's October Mail Club set. I do stickers in a print each month to send out to my Patreon supporters, and the theme for October is sort of a loose Halloween dress-up theme. I drew 2 of my characters as wizards as part of a set I've been doing for the last few years, and a print with the cats dressed up as vampires. I had a lot of fun with this month's merch, and if you'd like to grab this art for yourself, make sure to join my Patreon during the month of October. Also, if you're unfamiliar with the characters, you can read the comic for free at castoff-comic.com. Links for both of those are in the description, but for now, on to the story. My very first brush with anime happened when I was pretty young, though I didn't realize it at the time. When I was in elementary school, my parents used to take me to the Blockbuster Video down the street on Friday night so I could rent a VHS to watch over the weekend. And I, being drawn in by the bright colors and pretty outfits, occasionally picked out one of the Sailor Moon movies. A few years later came my Pokemon phase, where I carried the official Pokemon handbooks to school with me to read during class and sprinted home from the bus stop every day so I wouldn't end up missing the opening scene of whatever Pokemon episode came on right after school. And of course there was the Hamtaro debacle from 5th grade that I already made a video about. These were cherished childhood memories for me, and obviously all these series were anime. But I didn't really learn what anime was until a few years later when, at my birthday party the summer before starting middle school, a friend gifted me a book, the first volume of a manga called Azumanga Daioh. Now, this was my first time reading a manga, and the friend who gifted it to me told me that it's a manga, so you have to read it backwards. And I didn't really understand what she meant, and thought that in addition to reading from right to left, you also had to read the pages from bottom to top, which is not correct. If you're unfamiliar, Azumanga Daioh is a series of 4-panel comic strips, and the manga had 2 comic strips per page. I remember myself and a few other friends hovered over the book trying to read it together at this party, and we were all trying to figure out if you were supposed to read from top to bottom, or from bottom to top, or left to right, or right to left, and bickering over which of us was correct. I remember at one point I was convinced that you were supposed to read the bottom right comic panel, then the bottom left, then the second right, second left, and onward, not realizing that the 2 strips on each page were completely separate from each other. It was an interesting evening. Later on, reading the book in the privacy of my room, I was finally able to parse how to read it correctly, and tore through the entire first volume, laughing at the jokes and getting to know the characters. At some point, I learned there were actually 3 more books in the series, and I had to beg my mom to take me to the Borders bookstore in the neighborhood, R.I.P. Borders, so I could buy the next volume of the weird little comic series that I liked. And I, of course, had to be a little sneaky and not let my mom look too hard at the book I was buying, because the comic was technically for ages 13 and up, and I was only 11 at the time. Eventually, I was able to get my hands on all 4 volumes, the complete set, and brought one of them to school with me almost every day to read between classes. I also eventually found out about the anime adaptation, and really wanted to watch it. So then I dragged my mom to Best Buy so I could buy the first Azumanga Daioh DVD, which was about $30 for 4 episodes. Yes, you heard right, not the first season, the first 4 episodes. This is just kind of how anime DVDs worked back then. I don't know if it was a cash grab or if DVDs just couldn't hold as much back then, but if you wanted to buy a full series of an anime on DVD, you'd have to drop probably hundreds of dollars in cash and buy the series only 4 episodes at a time. This was a few years before Netflix was even a thing and well before any other online streaming platforms. So Little Star swallowed the pain and shelled out a huge amount of my itty-bitty child budget on 4 episodes of an anime. I never ended up collecting the full DVD series. I think I maybe bought the first 4 DVDs in total, but that's just how things were for anime back then, so you just kind of accepted it. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Star, this all seems relatively tame. You said this was gonna be a compilation of cringe stories, and oh, my sweet summer children, this is the prologue. It's about to get so much worse. You see, after discovering Azumanga I was a pretty casual enjoyer of a single manga series. I liked reading the comics, but I wasn't, obsessed or anything. No, what really kicked off my full-blown weeb phase was a little series called Tokyo Mew Mew. I remember the exact moment vividly. On the bus to school in fall of 6th grade. My friends, who shared the same bus route, and I were sitting together, excitedly talking about manga and the games we liked. And one of my friends said that she started reading a new magical girl series called Tokyo Mew Mew. I asked her what it was about, and she told me a bit, and I can't remember if she lent me the first volume or if I ended up buying it for myself later, but either way, I ended up getting my hands on a copy of Volume 1. The story was about a group of middle school girls who end up getting infused with the DNA of endangered animals, which gives them magical girl abilities and the power to fight against evil aliens trying to take over the Earth. And I don't know what exactly drew me into this series, but one thing was for sure. I fell in love hard and fast. I loved everything about it. The art style, the character designs, the fact that the main character was a cute cat girl in a pink dress, the super cute and girly aesthetic of the series, all of it. I was hooked. And this was the start of my full, plummeting descent into weebdom. Over the next few months, I became obsessed with Tokyo Mew Mew, and I really do mean obsessed. Every time I had $10 saved up, I'd beg my mom to take me to the bookstore so I could buy the next volume and see what would happen next in the story. Scanned and fan-translated manga existed at the time, but I was largely unaware of it. I took one of the books with me to school almost every single day and would read and reread them over and over and over again. I still have the same copies of the books I had back then, and they are extremely well loved, we'll put it that way. Burgeoning artist that I was, I also spent a lot of time drawing fan art, doodling the characters and the little symbols from the series on the margins of my worksheets. Also, complete sidebar, but yes, I definitely had those how to draw manga books as a teen. Yes, those ones. You know the ones. My friends and I looked through those all the time. They were a treasure trove of interesting art advice, but anyway. I think the height of my Tokyo Mew Mew obsession was definitely... Well, okay, so in Volume 2 of the manga, there's this scene where the main character Ichigo is on a date with her crush, and he gives her a little choker with a bell on it. You know, that like a cat would wear, because he literally got it off of a random cat they found, but it's fine, whatever, don't worry about it. Anyway, she wears this choker for the entire rest of the series. It's like a big part of... It's a symbol of their relationship and whatever. And Little Star was like, oh my god, I could totally make a choker like that and wear it, and I'd be just like Ichigo. So at some point, I dragged my mom to the local craft store, bought a spool of red ribbon and a pack of jingle bells, tied one of the bells onto the ribbon, and I made my own super low budget cat bell choker. And then I wore it to school for 2 years. I wore this thing every single day for 2 years. Like, I literally jingled when I walked, and when I went up and down stairs, you could hear me coming. I remember on my last day of middle school, I was in my theater class, and there was this one kid I kind of had a crush on in the all my friends have crushes on boys, so I guess I will also claim I have a crush on a random boy who is slightly attractive and then do absolutely nothing about it type of way. And we were all going around and signing people's yearbooks like you do on the last day of school. And after my quote-unquote crush was done signing mine, he kind of reached up and poked the bell on my neck, and the rest of the day, my friends and I were giggling excitedly about, oh my God, he rang my bell! Ah! God, I can't believe I'm making a video about this shit. This is so embarrassing. God. Now, I know Tokyo Mew Mew did have one of those crappy over-localized 4Kids dubs of the anime that played on Saturday mornings alongside stuff like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! But I actually didn't find out about that until years later, and thus never watched that version. But at some point, I did realize that Tokyo Mew Mew had an anime adaptation, and upon hearing about this, I was determined to find it and watch it somehow. But how was one to watch this show in the mid-2000s before internet streaming was commonplace, when the show wasn't licensed in English and you couldn't buy DVDs of it? The 4Kids dub doesn't count. What was one to do? Well, it was quite simple, actually. You just watch it on YouTube. Back in the early lawless days of YouTube, when the site was just getting started and looked like this, stuff wasn't really taken down for copyright reasons very often. Music, anime, you name it. It was like the freaking Wild West out here. So people could usually get away with uploading entire fan-subbed episodes of anime on YouTube and not get them taken down, with the caveat that YouTube videos couldn't be longer than 10 minutes. So you'd have entire YouTube accounts dedicated to uploading fan-subbed episodes of anime in 3 parts. 10 minutes, 10 minutes, and then the 3 to 5 minutes left at the end. And when I discovered this as a young weeaboo, this was how I watched most, if not all, of my anime. I still bought DVDs where I could, but for things that couldn't be bought at my local Best Buy, I turned to trusty YouTube. After I got home from school and finished my homework for the day, I'd hole up in the family computer room, because we only had one computer, and it had its own room in the house. I'd get comfy and binge watch my favorite anime, 10 minutes at a time. I watched a lot of stuff like this. Tokyo Mew Mew was my first and the one I remember the most clearly, but I also vividly remember watching shows like Shugo Chara and Kamikaze Kaito Jin and Full Moon this way as well. Low-quality TV rips of these shows, usually with the little clock time code up in the top corner, subtitled by fan translators and uploaded for myself and other fans to watch and get excited about. And watching anime on YouTube was also how I discovered something else that would become a big part of my life back in the day: AMVs, or anime music videos. The predecessor to your over-edited CapCut TikTok edits, people would take footage from anime and cut them into music videos with popular songs from the time, like Every Time We Touch by Cascada, or Bring Me to Life by Evanescence, or DDR songs, or Nightcore versions of just about anything. Oh, if you're unfamiliar with that term, Nightcore versions of songs are basically where you take a song and you speed it up a little bit so the beat is faster and it's more high-pitched. You know, like people do on TikTok these days. It's why I kind of get annoyed when I see sped-up songs on TikTok and everyone comments, "Oh my god, the TikTok version of this song is so good." Like, it's not the TikTok version of the song. There's a word for it already. It's Nightcore. You guys just invented Nightcore again. I keep hearing the Nightcore version of Cascada's Bad Boy on TikTok recently, like it's a new trend, and that song was the ringtone of my very first cell phone when I was like 14 years old. It was a flip phone. I couldn't even text on it. Didn't have a camera. Respect your elders, damn it. Anyway, so when I was fully in my weeb phase, I watched a ton of AMVs. The favorites of my very first YouTube account were full of all my favorite collections of Tokyo Mew Mew AMVs set to different songs. I had like hundreds of these things saved. But over time, watching all these videos, it made me want to make AMVs of my own. And by sheer coincidence, my dad was in the middle of a home video preservation project and had some decently usable video software installed on the family computer. Now, I didn't know how to download anime episodes from the internet, but I did have some anime DVDs that I had bought, and ripping them off the DVDs with the editing software turned out to be pretty easy. And so, the possibility of making AMVs was actually pretty open to little me. Granted, all I had to work with was about 8 episodes of Azumanga from the DVDs I owned, but in my mind that was more than enough. The next conundrum was how to get the music. Again, I didn't know how to download songs directly from the internet, but I figured out a workaround. The computer had a voice recorder function and a little plug-in microphone, and I had a pair of earbud headphones I used with the music player I had at the time. So what I would do So I'd find a song that I wanted to use for an AMV on YouTube. I'd plug in my headphones and I would play the song on max volume. And then I'd put the microphone right next to the headphones and record the song playing through the voice recorder program on the computer. And I'd just record the entire song that way. Assuming no one came in the room and made a noise that would mess up my recording, I now had a beautiful, perfect, entirely lossless MP3 that I could use for my AMV making purposes. This is a joke, by the way. The audio quality was terrible, but little me was nothing if not resourceful. I ended up making a bunch of AMVs over the course of a few months. I did eventually figure out how to download songs directly, and audio quality improved hugely, and I taught myself video editing software entirely from scratch just so I could cobble together some little anime music videos to whatever song I felt like. And I really do mean whatever song. I was not picky. My magnum opus was actually an Ozymandias AMV set to the song Albuquerque by Weird Al Yankovic, which, if you don't know, is an 11-minute long song. And again, seeing as YouTube videos had to be less than 10 minutes, I uploaded this thing in 3 parts. It was an undertaking. And then at some point, part 1 got removed because of a copyright strike, and I couldn't re-upload it because I didn't keep the video files after uploading them, so now that's just lost media. Ain't that just the way? So, around the time me and all my friends were getting into anime, we were also getting more acquainted with the internet in general. These were the days before most social media. MySpace was a thing, but I never really used it, and there was LiveJournal too, but that really never appealed to me either. However, there was a new website that a lot of my anime-loving school friends started using around this time. This small, niche little forum website called Gaia Online. And everybody in a certain age range just took a bunch of psychic damage just from me mentioning that name. What's up, fellow Gaians? I see you. You're in this cringe hole with me. Let's go. If you're too young to know what Gaia is, or just weren't in this particular corner of the internet at the time of its peak popularity, Gaia was an online pseudo-social media that was a combination of a forum and a digital dress-up game, where you earned currency by posting in the forums that could then be spent on items and outfits for your digital avatar. Here's what mine looked like, by the way. Almost my entire main circle of friends used the site, and eventually I saved up enough in-game gold to buy us a guild, which was basically a private invite-only forum that all my IRL friends used to converse with each other. Again, this was years and years before any kind of modern social media. Some of us had cell phones, but we didn't have texting, and AOL Instant Messenger was a thing, but none of us really used it for whatever reason. So this guild was basically our little friend group chat hosted on a weird little anime website. And, fun fact, Gaia Online saves all your previous forum history, so you can, in fact, see every post you ever made on the forum and just wince and cringe at how your middle school self used to type. I, regrettably, was definitely one of those lol so random types. I think I have largely blocked those memories from my mind, but the forum archives don't lie. I unfortunately couldn't get screenshots for this video because I think my account finally got nuked for inactivity, and my account is tied to a long-dead email address that I can't recover, but whatever you're imagining is probably accurate. The site also let you have forum signatures, you know, like little segments of text or images under each of your posts, and I definitely had one that I made myself in Photoshop that was a JPEG of Quiche, the anime villain from the green-haired alien guy from Tokyo Mew Mew, with text that I slapped on top of it in Photoshop that said, "Aliens are drop-dead sexy. Yes, I know it's horrible, okay? Mock me all you want. I can take it. I'm making a whole video about how cringe I was as a child. Don't pretend like you didn't also do weird stuff as an 11-year-old. Oh, God. Anyway, my friends and I got up to a lot of nonsense on Gaia, and there ended up being a lot of drama as well. Fights over text in the forums and in the comments of our user journals, that kind of thing. Social media drama before social media. The biggest fight I can remember was over some of the in-game items. Gaia had a lot of animal-themed items like ears and tails that you could wear as accessories, and at some point, my group of friends who used Gaia decided that we should all customize our avatars with different animal sets. One of us wanted to have a fox-themed avatar, another friend of ours would be wolf-themed, and then I'd get all the cat-themed accessories. And I was happy with my designation of the cat girl. This was well and truly during the height of my Tokyo Mew Mew obsession after all. The problem was that back then, the only cat items available on Gaia were kind of ugly. They were yellow with brown stripes, and they were a really awkward shape and just really weren't cute at all. The fox items, on the other hand, were much more aesthetically pleasing and cost about the same as the cat items. So once I had the gold saved up for one of the sets, I ended up shrugging and buying the fox set instead. I figured that I could just save up and buy the cat-themed items later, and it wasn't that big of a deal. Cut to the next day, my friend, who was the group's designated fox character, was so pissed that she didn't talk to me the entire next day at school. Imagine being so up your butt about an equipable item in a forum game, right? However, I think the cringiest weeb thing I did on Gaia was... Okay, so one of my things when I was a kid is that I obviously was not very cool, but I really wanted the approval of my friends. I wanted to be able to brag about things I got to do and be seen as cool amongst my friend group. There's some trauma there. Definitely a reason for why that was a high priority for Baby Star. We're not going to go into it because it's a whole completely unrelated can of unfortunate. But yeah, suffice to say, I wanted my friends to think I was cool. And I was even willing to lie for that approval. And one of the things I tried to do was come up with a fake friend who lived in Japan. I made him a Gaia account, and I wrote a couple of super convincing journal entries about being a normal American kid who moved to Japan for some reason that I couldn't be bothered to come up with. And then I immediately turned around and told all my friends, guys, look, here's my totally real friend who lives in Japan. Isn't that neat? They all totally believed it. Just kidding. Absolutely no one believed this, and his account was abandoned by me just days after creating it. RIP imaginary friend. I think his name was Hero or something. I don't remember. He's dead now. The whole thing was definitely a weird product of the anime fan to Japan loving weeaboo pipeline I was flowing down rapidly at that age. You know the drill. You get into anime and suddenly you're watching a bunch of different anime, then it's moving on to trying to learn more about Japan in general, trying to eat Japanese food all the time, trying to learn Japanese, inserting Japanese words into random conversations because you think it's cool and interesting, giving all your original characters Japanese names, you know, all that good stuff. My friends and I definitely fell into this pattern, and 7th and 8th grade was the peak of it. We all wanted to try and learn Japanese, but this was well before things like Duolingo or other easy-to-use programs for language learning existed. You could potentially try to take a class, but we were really too young for that kind of thing. We were required to take foreign language classes at school, and we would have loved to take Japanese instead of French or Spanish or whatever, but our school didn't offer it as a language. So we took it upon ourselves to try and learn on our own. But not like the way one would actually learn a language and retain any of the knowledge. At some point, I ended up buying a pocket English to Japanese dictionary, and my friends and I spent our lunch periods looking up how to say random words and then tried to use those words in conversation like it was a normal thing to do. We certainly had the spirit, it was a bit like trying to catch a fish by screaming the word fish at the ocean. Nothing was being accomplished there. Now, this wasn't my idea, but at some point one of my other friends brought up the crazy idea that we should all try really hard to learn Japanese before we finished high school. That way we could all try and study abroad there during our senior year. Without a good way for us to take Japanese classes in school, this was a doomed proposition from the start, but it definitely at least got all our sugar-fueled preteen minds daydreaming about someday getting to study abroad in Japan, that holy sacred land where all the animes come from. What a dream! Now, the absolute height of my Japan-obsessed cringe is so embarrassing I don't even want to mention it in this video because I don't need the entire internet knowing about the peak of my shame. And I've already told you guys about some stuff, so you know it's bad. It was a relatively minor incident, all things concerned, but thinking about it makes me cringe so hard that I fold inward on myself and become a screaming black hole of shame. What I will say is that I ended up acquiescing and telling my half-Japanese friend Sarah about it after she begged me to last time I visited her, and she laughed so hard I was worried she was going to drive off the road. So, do what you will with that information. By the way, friend Sarah and I actually have a podcast where we talk about idol anime, and you guys should totally go listen to it. It's called Idol Days Pod on YouTube and all other social media. Wink, wink, hint, hint, links in the description. Okay, anyway, once I got to mid-high school, my weeaboo-ness started calming down slowly but surely. It was a slow decline of the weeb meter. I ended up getting really into Full Metal Alchemist after my Tokyo Mew Mew phase died down, and that series was my primary focus for years after. I remember I bought the final volume of Tokyo Mew Mew and the first volume of FMA in the same trip to the bookstore, and brought them both to a sleepover at my friend's house that night. I was the last one to fall asleep, and I remember reading my FMA manga by the light of the street lamp outside my friend's window. You ever pick up a new piece of media and something just clicks? Like you know you found something really special that's going to stick with you for a long time? This was one of those moments. When I went to my very first teeny tiny anime convention, I bought a bunch of FMA merch in the dealer's room, including a shirt I got signed by some of the English voice actors who were there, and one of the FMA pocket watches, which, yes, I absolutely wore to school. Not every day, but, a couple times. I kept going to conventions a lot after that, and what convention stories aren't in my cosplay stories video will probably make it into a video of their own someday, but I will say that I definitely bought one of those fleece hats with the cat ears on it, the ones that were all the rage in the artist alley in the mid to late 2000s, you know the ones. However, I finally stopped wearing the cat bell choker, and the dress code at my school didn't allow us to wear hats, so I thankfully never wore the fleecy monstrosity anywhere except to conventions or occasional hangouts with friends. My friends and I also started going to our school's anime club in high school that eventually evolved into the Japanese Culture Club. The club officers did their best to come up with presentations and actually, teach us stuff, but a lot of the club meetings just evolved into us playing Mafia or talking about anime. My weeaboo phase had definitely died down pretty significantly by the time I hit my junior year of high school. My friends and I still watched anime, played video games, drew fan art, went to conventions together, all that jazz, but we were a little more normal by that point. I still kept trying to learn Japanese where I could, and actually taught myself how to read hiragana and katakana a few years later because I kept meeting people in Animal Crossing New Leaf who spoke Japanese, and I wanted to be able to read what they were saying in the game chat. Nowadays, I watch maybe one anime per season, and I go to conventions mostly for work, but I still enjoy them. And I do have quite a few anime figures around the house, but most of them I got from back when I lived in Shizuoka and had a bit of an addiction to crane games. Consider the weeb phase largely grown out of. But here's the thing. As embarrassing and cringe-inducing as it is to think about, I do think it's fun to reflect on this kind of stuff because you can see the origins of a lot of things I do today reflected in that time. I made some of my very first comics after reading and being inspired by Azumanga Daioh. The comics in Azumanga Daioh were just silly little stories about the lives of a group of girls in high school getting up to shenanigans. And my brain thought, hey, my friends and I also get up to shenanigans. I should make comics about it. So I did. I painstakingly measured out comic strip panels and drew templates into my sketchbooks and filled those panels with drawings of weird jokes about our school lives and funny things that happened during our day-to-day. And then I just never stopped doing that. I kept making comics, filled entire sketchbooks with them even, started coming up with original characters to act out jokes and punchlines I came up with. At some point, I started adding fan comics into the mix, and eventually I started uploading them to websites like DeviantArt. My first attempt at a long-form comic was my very first webcomic that I started right after I graduated high school, and now I make comics for my job. Like this silly little thing I did, inspired by a manga a friend got me in 6th grade, set me on the path that led me here. I taught myself video editing software to make AMVs as an excitable 12-year-old, and now I do YouTube. My failed attempt at studying abroad eventually evolved into me spending a few years in Japan as an English teacher instead, which helped me discover my love of teaching and is one of the big reasons that my book How to Webcomic exists. And, I don't know, we can laugh at all the dumb shenanigans Tiny Weeaboo Star got into, but I genuinely think it's pretty cool that you can see the early stages of everything I'd grow up to be reflected in that little awkward phase of my life. May your passions light the way and all that. So yes, while our awkward preteen selves can be a source of shame for us, they're also an important piece of our personal histories. And sometimes the hobbies and interests and obsessions we develop during our younger years can be the origin stories for things we love as adults. Whether you're a comic artist who was inspired after reading a manga, a writer who got into prose after writing fan fiction as a teen, an artist who grew up watching anime on TV as a kid, etc. I see that kind of history in myself, I can see it in all of my friends, and I think, if you look, you'll be able to see it in yourself. And if you're a younger person in my audience who may be going through a weeby phase of your own right now, I'd say just don't worry about being embarrassing and just enjoy it. Embrace it. Maybe don't go too deep into idolizing a country just because of the media it produces, but if you find something that you enjoy, if being into anime or manga or games or cosplay or whatever brings you joy, then don't let the fear of being cringy turn you away from enjoying it. Don't kill the part of you that's cringy, kill the part of you that cringes. Life is too short to be embarrassed about the things you enjoy, so find something you love and love it fearlessly. Someday that love might blossom into something incredible or life-changing. And even if it doesn't, well, at least you'd have fun along the way. I still can't believe I wore that cat bell necklace for 2 years, though. Oh my god. And that's a wrap on this trip down memory lane. I hope you enjoyed it, and hey, since you watched this video all the way through to the end, now I want to hear your cringiest stories from your middle school phases. Leave them in the comments and let's commiserate together, and I don't know, subscribe if you haven't already for more future fun stories and such of this type. Once again, the art in the video is for my webcomic Castoff's October Mail Club. If you want to grab this month's merch for yourself, head on over to patreon.com/castoff and join before the end of October. However, if you don't have the funds to join the Patreon, but you like the stickers, new thing, I've started outsourcing my stickers and will be putting any extra leftovers on my shop after the month is over, so there you go. They'll be discontinued once I run out of stock, but if you're quick, you'll probably be able to catch them. Lastly, as always, if you like to read my webcomic Castoff, you can do so at castoff-comic.com. We're getting very close to the end of the current chapter and stuff is getting very intense, and I'm very excited for you all to see what's coming. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a nice day. Bye!